Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this workshop of the MCAG Governing Board to order. The time is 2:34. 2:33, thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. May we have roll call, please?
Director Espinoza, Director Hogue, Director Serrato,
Here.
Director McDaniel, Director Moran, Director Bonta,
Here.
Director Nelson, Director Pereira,
Present.
Director Silvera, Director Yanis,
Here.
Chair Pedroza.
Here.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to invite John Checkley to the podium for his presentation, please.
Chair and members of the Merced County Association of Government, Board of Directors. My name is John Checkley. I'm a Deputy Director at Merced County Human Service Agency, primarily responsible for some of our housing and homeless issues here. We created this space in order to give us an opportunity to provide you updates on multi-jurisdictional efforts, multi-department efforts that impact each of your constituents. So today we've actually invited a guest speaker here to talk about the Care Court. It's a new court that's being established for, well, I won't get into that. I'm going to let that come from our experts here, but it does impact constituents in each of your communities. So before turning it over, I do want to mention that we do have another opportunity here locally through our managed care plan for some capital funding. We've seen this utilized in the past for affordable housing development in the city of Merced at the retreat apartments. Just an example of how it was used. $2.5 million was provided to the developer that set aside 30 units for folks experiencing homelessness who were able to then get housed in partnership with our housing authority. So there's a lot of creative ways that can be done. I thought it would be good information to bring to you all. If you do have any projects that might be relevant, you can either reach out to myself. It's a very streamlined application process. So I'd like to invite up Delilah Garza. Thank you. I struggle with that name. Who will give you a little update on the Care Court. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Delilah Garza, and I am the Community Enrichment Director over the Care Division at Behavioral Health and Recovery Services. So today I'm just going to give you guys a broad overview on Care Court, which is the Community Assistance Recovery and Empowerment Act. In Merced County, Care Court is scheduled to launch in December 1st of 24. Currently, there are 8 counties that have implemented, with the remaining 50 counties scheduled to implement December 1st. So on the agenda today, I'm just going to go over a little bit about what CARE is, the eligibility for the program, who can be a petitioner, what that process looks like, success in the program, and then if there is not success, it could potentially lead to conservatorship and what that looks like. So the CARE Act creates a voluntary pathway to deliver mental health and substance abuse services to individuals who are diagnosed on the schizophrenia spectrum. The goal of Care Court is essentially to provide some services prior to more restrictive means such as conservatorship. So we're trying to help those individuals and those families access mental health services prior to worse outcomes. So to be eligible for care, there are some specific criteria. One must be 18 years. One must be 18 years old. They must be on the schizophrenia spectrum. So, for example, if someone has a standalone substance abuse diagnosis, along with perhaps bipolar, then they would not qualify. It has to be within the schizophrenia spectrum, but they can also have a substance abuse diagnosis with schizophrenia. In addition to that, the diagnosis has to be severe in degree and persistent. They have to not currently be in a voluntary treatment program. They must be at a point where they're unlikely to survive without assistance. The CARE Act must be the least restrictive option for that potential person, and it must be beneficial to them. So that is the eligibility criteria, which is laid out under Welfare and Institutions Code 5972. So to be a petitioner for the CARE program, there also is specific criteria. There are only a number of entities that can petition. So one must be, again, 18 years or older, but they can be a family member, so grandparent, parent, sibling, child, a first responder, a provider or clinician who has treated that individual within the last 30 days, public guardian, county behavioral health services, again, has to have treated them within the last 30 days, adult protective services, and then, of course, the respondent can self-refer. So a little bit about the process for one as they journey through CARE Court. To begin the process, one must petition the court. And they do that with a CARE 100, which is the form that is essentially going to lay out the eligibility. It's going to allow the petitioner to state who they are, provide some information related to their interactions, and then provide information related to their eligibility in terms of their schizophrenia diagnosis. So there's a couple of ways that they can do that. They can present the information on the form itself, or they can provide additional evidence with the petition, or they can provide a CARE 101, which is a declaration by a mental health professional. So once the petition is submitted, the judge will decide essentially whether that petition meets prima facie. If the judge decides it does, then BHRS will be instructed to essentially provide a report and engage the client and services to see if they meet criteria. So the team that we have, or we are working on having at BHRS, is going to consist of a mental health clinician, a mental health worker, and a peer support. So those individuals will be the team that will be assisting the client through the process. So if the client is likely to be eligible, then of course we will be instructed to respond. Once we engage the client has the option of engaging in services voluntarily. So if the county and the client decide, I want to access BHRS services, and they are willing to report that back to the court, then the CARE Court case can be dismissed. If the client decides to engage in the CARE Act proceedings, then they are welcome to do so as well, and then that's when we will assign the team to them, and then we will create a plan, which is called a CARE agreement, which is essentially going to lay out all the services that are going to help this individual become successful. It's important to note that along with the team that the client is going to be assigned, they're also eligible to pick a volunteer supporter. So that volunteer supporter can be a family member, a friend, and the goal of that supporter is to essentially help them in their decision-making process, so supported decision-making throughout the process. If the client does not engage in services, and we have gotten to the point where we've made multiple attempts, then the CARE Court process can continue, which will include a clinical evaluation and a court-ordered care plan. So just to differentiate, the CARE agreement is voluntary. That's something the client engages in, whereas the CARE plan is court-ordered. It's important to note, though, that even though it is court-ordered, the CARE Act in itself is voluntary. So even though the court orders it, there is no recourse to the client. So these are some of the services that we will assist the client in attaining. Behavioral health, which includes substance abuse services, medications to assist that client in stabilization. The court can also order a medication order. However, it is different from an involuntary medication order. So even if the court orders the medication, there is no recourse to the client for not wanting to partake in the medication. And we also are able to assist with housing support. So we do have some units at the 1213 V Street location, and our CARE Court participants will take priority in that form of housing. In addition to that, we're also going to be assisting with social services, so linking them with CalFresh, Medi-Cal, Social Security, anything that's going to assist them in success. So success with the program occurs at 1 year. At the 1 year mark, the client will present in court along with the team, and the client is either going to participate in graduation from the program. They can elect to remain in the program for an additional year. The court can reappoint them for an additional year, or the case can be dismissed due to non-participation. It is important to note that at any point during this process, the court can dismiss the case if the client is not engaging. Now, if the client does not engage and there was a court-ordered care plan, then the court can refer the client for an LPS evaluation, which is essentially conservatorship. So just a little bit about what that looks like. The Lanterman Petra Short Conservatorship is named after the authors of the bill. It is important to note that the CARE Act does not change the eligibility for that conservatorship. So that conservatorship is essentially governed by Welfare and Institutions Code 5008. And basically, to meet that criteria, one has to be gravely disabled, which is defined as the inability to meet their needs for food, clothing, and shelter due to severe mental illness. So once we receive a referral through our department, just to give you a little bit of insight into the process, we receive a referral. We do have that client assessed by our medical director, so they receive a clinical evaluation. Once the medical director asserts that the client does meet criteria, then that case is assigned to a deputy public conservator. The deputy public conservator commences their investigation into what the client's estate looks like, what type of supports they have in place, what other services have been tried and failed. Because what we're looking at is to see if everything else has been attempted, because conservatorship should be the option of last resort. So if the client meets the criteria at that point, then we do petition the court for authority, and that authority is given by the judge signing letters and orders. So if a client is referred from care court, essentially, so just to kind of back up a little bit, when we are in our conservatorship investigation, if the client hasn't gone through care court, that will be an option for us in terms of the least restrictive option, and so we may refer the client there. However, the client goes through the care court process and then they fail, that case will be referred to us, and then at that point, it will be assumed that all other options have been tried, and then we will commence our investigation. So that was just a broad overview of the Care Court Act. Care Court, again, is set to implement on December 1st in this year. We are currently working on our webpage, which should be up and running by July 1st. We're also working on multiple informational packets, and we are also closely working with the court. So our collaboration with CARE Act is going to be closely with the court, because obviously it is a court process. It is important to note that it is not a criminal process, it is a civil process. So again, it's completely voluntary and there is no recourse to the client. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Any questions? Lloyd?
No. Where did you say that the priority housing was going to be?
At 1213 V Street, the BHBH Bridge Housing.
That's the existing home key project that we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Where the old pine cone?
No, I know where it is.
Yeah.
I just didn't hear her say it.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
I want to thank you for a really good presentation first. Second, what are you hearing from the 8 counties who've already implemented it so far?
So the 8 counties that have implemented have essentially all shared that the numbers have not essentially reached what we anticipated. So most of the counties anticipated that we would be inundated with referrals, and unfortunately that isn't what it appears to be at this time. All 8 counties have essentially shared the same sentiment. So for example, I think Tulare County has received a total of 10 referrals, and then 2 actually met the prima facie. So there's a lot of misunderstanding in terms of the scope of what CARE Act can do, and in addition to who's eligible for the program.
Where are the referrals coming from? They're coming from family, they're coming from law enforcement, they're coming from...
The majority has been family. Okay. So one of the other interesting facts is that when the program is going to be implemented, most assume that it would be first responders, behavioral health, but most of the referrals have come from family.
And are they people who are previously on the street, unsheltered, or family members who are living with, or who are housed?
The surprising fact is that it has been mostly individuals who are housed that have been referred over to the program. And those that have been unhoused, the consensus has been that they haven't been open to shelter. So that's another challenge that they're working through.
Thank you.
Director Yanez.
What is the plan as far as providing awareness and education? And I say that because as a family member or somebody, right, or even as a first responder, I know we saw it with AB 1014 with gun violence restraining orders. There had to be training for law enforcement because we didn't know it existed, and families don't know, things like that exist. What's the plan for that to create the awareness?
So we are currently working on outreach now. We are set to present at a number of different meetings we're starting out with our law enforcement partners, and of course, we are going to be partnering or working with NAMI. We are, Adult Protective Services is a part of our work group, so we are trying to put the word out in terms of the outreach. We are currently scheduling all of those meetings now that we kind of have a plan in place in terms of how CARE Act will work in our county. So again, the webpage, informational pamphlets. We do plan to have informational pamphlets as well at the Self-Help Center at the courthouse, not only for CARE Court, but also for behavioral health services. So for example, we want to make sure there's a warm handoff if the client doesn't qualify for the program, that there are other services available and they can have access to those.
All right, thank you. And then second question was, I know there's a nexus in the Welfare Institution Code related to alcoholism. So how does that
So for
fit in?
conservatorship, the definition of gravely disabled does essentially state that one has to be unable to meet their needs of food, clothing, and shelter due to severe mental illness or alcoholism.
Okay.
So that is in there. However, SB 43, which is a new Senate bill that will be implemented in this county. I believe there's only 2 counties that have implemented thus far, with the other 56 remaining are scheduled to implement between 25 and 26. But that does expand the definition of gravely disabled to include substance abuse, personal safety, and medical care. Okay. So that is going to change the LPS Act quite a bit, and the belief is that that will impact the counties a lot more than what CARE Court has.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so we will end this part of it and come back at 3 p.m. for the regular meeting. Thank you. All right, good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting of the MCAG Governing Board to order. The time is 3:01. Before we begin, I'd like to let everyone know that we do have a Spanish translator present for those who may need language assistance. We have them. Okay, thank you. Now, may we please have roll call?
Director Espinoza. Director Hoag. Director Serrato.
Here.
Director McDaniel.
Present.
Director Moran.
Present.
Director Bonta.
Here.
Director Nelson.
Here.
Director Pereira.
Here and present.
Director Silvera.
Present.
Director Yanez.
Here.
Chair Pedroza.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, I'm going to ask Director Serrato to please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 5 is the approval of the agenda. Do any of the directors or the executive director have any comments on the agenda? Okay, is there a motion?
Chair Silvera, motion
We have a motion to second. Please call the roll. Or, no, I'm sorry, never mind. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, it passes. The next item is public comment. Public comment is now open for anyone to speak on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have anyone in the room today who would like to comment? Okay, come on up. Are you timing it? Oh, it's right there. Yeah.
Good afternoon, board members. I'm a little nervous. I guess I say my name and where I'm from. Is that correct? Isabel Sanchez in 838 West Childs Avenue on the south side. And I'm a little concerned about the city bus that goes through there on Childs by the Golden Valley Clinic. And that's why I'm here today. Yeah. Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Ashley Marie, and I work with a lot of the South Merced residents in the community. Miss Isabel Sanchez previously mentioned that she had a lot of concerns regarding the bus that runs through West Childs. And so I'm going to provide a little bit more insight as to what concerns she has, just so that we can get a little bit more clarification. During a walking tour hosted in January and December by residents in South Merced, some of the community members did express to some decision makers present that evening that a city bus that runs on West Childs often stops in front of the Golden Valley Health Center. And as you may know, that is a 2-lane road that does not have ample space for a bus to pull over directly on that street without impeding traffic. And so when we raised this issue, the city referred residents to the traffic committee. And after raising that issue on March 5th at the traffic committee, they suggested, residents did suggest that an inlet be created to prevent the bus from impeding traffic. However, the traffic committee told residents that this would have to be a broader discussion with Golden Valley Health Center representatives, as well as MCAG, the entity that oversees the bus routes. When I did a little bit of research online, I realized that there is no stop that is supposed to be on West Childs. So this doesn't appear to be a regular bus route. This might appear to be a transit bus that might let residents or community members that often go to Valley Health Center for any medical services, patients might be able to stop there at request. And so as a result, we come to you today to ask if we can schedule a meeting with you, traffic committee members, Golden Valley Health Center representatives, and residents from South Merced, as recommended by the traffic committee, to find a solution. This obviously needs to be a broader conversation. It's a little bit unclear as to what bus it is, if it's a route that's fixed, or if this is something that is just a misunderstanding. But a lot of the community members that live in South Merced, particularly on South P Street, on West Childs, as Miss Isabel has mentioned, and it's a big concern that for traffic impeding traffic, or for any accidents that it may have caused. And so we would be happy to work together to identify a solution, such as a bus turnout or an inlet, which we suggested at traffic committee, and we hope to meet soon. I will be here for the remainder of the meeting. I will also have business cards in case anyone that is interested in facilitating this conversation is interested in reaching out to me. And so I hope that we can exchange contact information and get started on this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, did you want to?
Okay. I appreciate those comments. I did receive a message, and our transit director has reached out to start this conversation. So we have been made aware. We do have flag stops that do allow for buses to pull over where there are riders. So we'd be happy to have this conversation. If you could, it looks like you're already doing that, connecting with Serenity Anderson, who's our transit director, and we can start there to make sure we fully understand where the issue is and what the issue is, so we can look at our solutions. Thanks for coming today.
Okay, thank you. Have we received any public comments, or anybody else wish to make a comment? Okay. Have we received any public comments by phone or email? Do we have anyone who wishes to provide comment on Zoom or anything? Okay. Item 7 is reports and presentations. 7A is the Citizens Advisory Committee report. I don't see anybody. Okay. No, there is no report today. 7B is the Caltrans report. Come on up.
Everybody. Oh, don't make me feel that welcome. I am still from Caltrans. Jeez. I handed out some of my speaking points to everybody, so if you wanted to read the detailed notes that I'm going to skip over a little bit, I'd appreciate it. Director Silvera, my friend, did point out I had a typo on the first one because I said Route 140 and Volta, and it's actually 152 where I say it before. So this is why I didn't do well in English in college. Anyway, I'll start. The California Transportation Commission in May allocated over nearly $2 billion in transportation infrastructure projects, and of that they allocated $430 million of the federal infrastructure investment and job act funds. Of that, there is nearly $1.5 million that's been allocated to help with the 152 Volta intersection project that's in Merced County. It's to be used to support the construction of a roundabout to improve traffic safety by reducing the severity of and the number of broadside collisions. If you want any more information on that, please let me know, or there is a website that you can contact of www.buildcalifornia.gov. The U.S. DOT released a call for applications under the Strengthening Mobility Revolutionizing Transportation Act. Short acronym is SMART. It's for planning and prototype grants for conducting demonstration projects focused on advancing smart city or community technologies and systems to improve transportation efficiency. There's $50 million available in that, and applications are due July 12th. So if you have a project, you don't have a lot of time to prepare for that one. Also, the Department of Energy has released a call for applications under its Communities Taking Charge program to support riding and driving electric vehicles. And that program is intent to make strategic investments at the local level to address key barriers that that provide access for electrified mobility options for individuals. And also it's to accelerate the transition for electrified from the micro, light, or medium duty fleet vehicles you may have in your service. That more information is at grants.gov. There's $54 million available in funding for that, and applications are due July 16th. So again, if anyone has any information they need from that, please let me know. The Federal Highway Department has also issued a call for grants. There is $45 million available under the Active Transportation Infrastructure Investment Program, ATIIP. That is also to provide construction infrastructure, provide safe and connected active transportation facilities, and provide especially for disadvantaged communities where many people rely on public transit. And lastly, well, not quite lastly, but the EPA has also issued a release for grants. There's $2 billion available in that program. It's not due until November 21st, so you've got some time for folks that may be interested in it. And the applications are intended to help community-driven projects that address climate change and reduce pollution. So it's a pretty broad category. And Caltrans, not to be outdone, has released a call for applications under the Highway Safety Improvement Program intended to achieve significant reduction in fatalities and serious injuries on the public roadway. These funds are to work on any public road or publicly owned bicycle or pedestrian pathway or trail, and it is available to public agencies, tribal agencies. There's $300 million available in that application. They're due September 9th, and that is handled under our District Local Assistance Program. So if you have any questions on any of those, please let me know. And as always, I'm here to hear any concerns that you may have, because I know I got friends that are waiting.
All right. Anybody have any questions? Go ahead.
Good to see you.
See you.
I just wanted to just pass along that, Mayor Nagy and I had asked for a look at some improvements on Highway 33 in Gustine, and Duper has started it. Outreach wasn't real good, I think, from him. But anyways, called me a couple days ago, and I think we're on track. And just let him know I appreciate the call and the engagement.
I will let him know. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Nothing needs cutting down.
Well, yeah, the corner of Snelling Road and Highway 59 is getting brushy again.
I knew there was some place.
Yeah, and the property owner there is willing to, they gave you access this last fall, early spring, to prune and clean. It's just growing back again.
Okay.
So I don't know if maybe some herbicide would be the easiest way to approach it, because everything's still small right now.
I'll let them know. I don't know if they're allowed because of all the EPA stuff, but I'll let them know that there's an issue with possibly line of sight. They need to go out and take care of that.
Okay. Yeah, even if they did a little bit of spraying on the state right-of-way would probably be helpful.
So it's the corner of 59
And Snelling Road?
Snelling Road.
Yeah.
All corners are just,
No, it is the southwest corner.
thank you.
Director Yanez.
Yeah, just some stuff from the west side. Badger Flat and Highway 152, the northeast shoulder, pretty much isn't a shoulder anymore. It's pretty much a pothole at this point. So the road dips down quite a bit. And the issue is people are making the northbound turn from Highway 152 if they're traveling west, and they're literally going into a pothole. Yeah. The other things that some citizens want to report on is Highway 165. It looks like at G Street and at East B Street, the road basically just looks like it's kind of sinking down into the shoulder there on the I guess it would be the west side.
Gutters.
Yeah, I don't think it's gutters. I think it's the shoulder of the corner. Yeah.
West side.
Yeah.
Sorry, I write slower than I speak, and that's pretty bad. Next.
Anything else? Yes.
Jim Bonta from Gustine, doing a roundabout, or I guess the city's doing a roundabout, but Caltrans has decided to make a detour from 140, turn south Avenue, proceed towards Sullivan Road, and then outside of 33. There's a school there, a middle school, at that corner of Sullivan, and actually it's Hunt. And I was just curious that Sullivan Road is already pretty lousy. And the question has come up, okay, now that Caltrans has decided to make that a highway, that road, will they be paving it over again once all the trucks are through tearing it up when the project is over?
I would love to tell you I have an answer for that off the top of my head, but I will have to
Would you please investigate?
charge of that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? There. Stacy.
I was going to mention these two things in my report, but I'll do it while you're here. The first is a thank you and to let the board know that we did have a successful site visit with Caltrans to the V Street and 140 area. There was a handful of folks came out from the district and some folks from our team and some from the city of Merced, just walked that intersection to just show the complexity of options and maybe inadequate signage, all of the things that several of the board members, I know Director Pereira has been one that has, and Mayor and Director Serrato, both. So thank you for that. I know there were a couple of I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, but shorter-term options around maybe greater visibility for the directional signage when you're heading south on V Street, maybe on the overpass or on the light, so that as you're approaching, it's more visible of what lane. But I also have to just thank the universe, because the traffic demonstrated every scenario that we said happens in the 20 minutes or so we were down there, from multiple trains to near rear ending as people are making a turn off of 140 and the queue to make a left is full, and it was quite illustrative. So yeah, so we'll continue with that conversation. I think that we need to touch base again to kind of see what the team came up with after the fact. The second is, and this is really big news, I was hoping Tom wasn't going to steal my thunder, so I'm thank you for not doing it, particularly for Director McDaniel, who's been a big champion of this through the Policy Council, is the District 10 nominated our 2 Highway 99 projects, that the 4-lane segments that need to be widened, nominated them to be funded for updated PIDs, which is the project initiation documents, which is step 1 in actually defining a project and identifying what the cost would be. And they were successfully funded for the coming fiscal year. So that means we'll have, I say updated PIDs loosely because they're with the managed lane recommendations that are coming through, and CAPTI, and in talking to Grace, it's the cost for these 2 PID updates really are more of like brand new PID cost level, because there's so much to be done. So I just want to thank the district for being a champion in that for us, and we look forward to getting started on those. Yeah, like I'll call you on July 1st. So thank you, Tom.
Director Serrato.
Thank you, Josh. Yeah, just real quick, thank your agency for all your work on the 140 and V intersection. It's certainly a priority within the city of Merced to address the congestion there. And prior directors as well, with Dennis Agar in the past, and now you guys too. Want to appreciate your work in trying to address it. And then something too to put on your radar is underneath the 16th Street Bridge over Bear Creek, there debris tends to accumulate there. So it's been an issue in the past, potentially with some flooding. So just to eliminate any potential, unnecessary risks of flooding. Right now, the creek's full with ag water, but in November or so, when the water starts to go out, there's usually a brief window before the rainy season before you can get in there. So I know we have talked with previous Caltrans folks in the past about it, but just wanted to put that on your radar as a potential priority as well to address that and any. Eliminate any unnecessary flooding risks. Thank you.
Potential priority or?
Anybody else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, item number 8 is information items, and these items are included for informational purposes and will not be presented by staff unless board members have questions. Are there any questions for staff? Okay. Item 9 is the consent calendar. These items may be acted on with one vote unless specifically removed for separate consideration by a member of the board, a member of staff, or a member of the public. Do any of the directors have questions for staff? Okay. Are there any comments from the public? Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, item number 10 is action items. These items will be presented by staff, and public comment will be available during the consideration of each item. Item 10A is a request to adopt Resolution 2024-6-20-02, approving the Transportation Development Act apportionments for fiscal year 24-25. Nav.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item is to adopt the TDA apportionment for fiscal year 24-25. Could you put up PowerPoint, please? As you know, TDA is a governor of these 3 funds, LTF, STA, and SGR. It's part of as a regional transportation agency, MCAG is responsible to administer these funds prescribed by the law, and including the approval of apportionments to eligible recipients. So while they get the slide up, This year's allocation for 24-25 for LTF is about $10,975,000, and then STA, which is State Transit Administrative Assistance, is $3.5 million, and SGR is about $496,000. In your handbook or in your packet on page 134 is how that $10.9 million is going to be divvied up. So about $500,000, 500. Oh, there we go. Next slide. Next slide. So this is how that $10.9 million is going to be divvied up. $580,000 is going to be for administrator and planning. $207,000 is going towards bike and ped. 7.8 towards transit, which $509,000 for rail. $6.6 million for TJPA operations. $350,000 for capital, and then $300,000 for yards. The remaining $2.3 million will go back to the jurisdictions for the streets and roads, which is the unobligated funds. As you can see, each jurisdiction does get some money. So, next slide. So the SGR, STA, estimate is about $3.5 million. 78,000 of the 3.5 goes to yards, and then the SGR of $496,000, 10,000 goes to yards for maintenance. So does anybody have any questions with this apportionments?
Okay. Are there any questions? Okay. Are there any? Oh, go ahead, Lloyd.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a quick comment. I appreciate the effort. When I first got on this board, there was really zero unobligated. And, you know, I really appreciate you working hard to get some of those dollars in that.
It's not just me, Stacy and Elizabeth over here really holds our feet to the fire. And
Well, I know, but, you know, you're the one standing there. You know, smile and I appreciate you sharing who's responsible as well. But, yeah. No, I think it's a big deal. You know, most people have been on here for a while, but
yeah,
I like it.
Yes, I agree. Before, historically, 100% used to go to transit, and now there's excess, and we're trying to be more efficient with our funding as well. So, thank you.
Okay. Are there any? Anybody from the public? All right. Is there a motion? Is there a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 10B is the request to authorize a contract for multi-location information technology support and maintenance in the amount of $1,018,962.
So I do apologize. Today is my month. I actually did some work last month, so you see a lot of name on it. So you just don't work as much. But all right, for your approval is a total. Today is a contract for IT services for a multi-location, not to exceed $1,018,962 for a 5-year agreement with 2 one-year options. As you know, MCAG, as an umbrella, you have TJPA and RWA. RWA has 2 sites, one in Los Banos, one right here on Highway 59. TJPA has various locations. We have at 1950 Wardrobe Avenue, along with downtown and MCAG building as well. They also help with at the Transpo as well. So the current contract with Apex Technology expires 6/30. They are actually going to help us until end of next month. So over the last 8 years, Apex has provided great service to MCAG, but we are moving on from them with the new contractor. Staff released an RFP back on February 2nd. Proposals were due on March 13th. MCAG received 9 proposals. Of the 9, 8 were responsive, 1 non-responsive. The valuation was based on comprehensive projects, qualification, project delivery, and cost efficiency. After the evaluation, Valley Technologic Inc. scored the highest. Staff started negotiations with Valley Technologic, which they reduced the cost by $86,000 over the 7 years. So that brings the cost down to $720,000 for 5 years, and then $298,000 for the 2 extension years, which brings it the total cost of $1,018,000 for the total 7 years. So does anybody have any questions about this?
Okay. Are there any questions? Any comments? Any comments from the public?
This contract will be split amongst the three agencies, TJPA, MCAG, and RWA.
Okay. Is there a motion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Item 10C is a request. Geez, Nav, you really did earn your paycheck last month, huh? Item 10C is a request to adopt the MCAG's other programs budget for fiscal year 24-25.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For your adoption is the MCAG Other Programs 24-25. MCAG's other budget, it works on MCAG items that does not fall under Caltrans purview. MCAG administers all the staffing for TJPA, RWA, and YARD. Staffing makes up 99% of the budget. The remaining 1% budget is working on MCAG items that are not qualified under Caltrans, like Finish the Highway 99, which advocates to finish 99 within the valley. Our advocacy program in this program is the One Voice program, along with the Valley Voice, to advocate for Merced County and the Valley as in general. And then we also do the AVA program, which is an abandoned vehicle abatement program, which is administered in Merced County for the vehicle abatement program. The total budget increased by $803,000. 99% of it is staff cost as reflected in the TJPA, RWA, and YARD's budget. So that concludes. So to recap, this item is to adopt the MCAG other programs for 24-25. Does anybody have any questions?
Do you have any questions? Any questions or comments from the public? All right, seeing none. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. All right. The moment we've all been waiting for, or at least I have been. Item 10D is a request to elect a chair and vice chair for fiscal year 24-25. Stacy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was exactly how I was going to tee this off. So I'll jump into it. So this body elects a chair and a vice chair to serve every fiscal year. So this term that the board would be electing will begin July 1 of 2024, and the term ends June 30 of 2025. This board did several years ago establish a board rotation policy as a guiding document to track the jurisdictions as they served in these roles. Our bylaws do require that there be a city and a county rep in each of these. So for example, if we have a county director as chair, we would need a city director as vice chair and vice versa. So that is one of, if not, that's one of two rules we abide by. The second being that any person to serve as chair must have 1 year of experience on the governing board. So you'd have to have been on the board for at least a year to serve as chair. However, that does not hold true if you serve as vice chair. You do not need to have that 1 year of experience. So this process is to nominate and to elect both the chair and a vice chair. Based on that rotation policy, the staff recommendation is to nominate and elect Vice Chair Paul Yanez from the city of Los Banos to serve as the board chairperson for a 1 year term commencing July 1st. And then to nominate and elect a director representing the county of Merced to serve as vice chair for the same term. The rotation of supervisors in this role has been at the discretion of the County Board of Supervisors. It's not been an MCAG decision. So typically we look to the county supervisors who serve as directors to nominate a colleague to serve as the role. And if there's an interest in seeing the roster or the rotation. It's on page 178. And I will note that the copy of the policy that the board adopted has been updated this year to reflect the 2023 JPA that was executed last year. No changes. It's just that document now references the chair rotation policy. Any questions? I'm happy to answer.
Oh, well, no, I was.
Okay.
That 2023 deal doesn't change the makeup of the board, does it? Okay.
Just the document itself.
I was just teasing.
Oh gosh, thank you.
You know how many closed sessions we had?
I'm turning off my mic.
But if you're done, I would like to move to nominate Paul Yanis as chair and Supervisor Silvera as vice chair.
Second. All right. Are there any comments from the public? Okay, is there a motion? We have it. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, congratulations.
What size is the best size?
Yeah. All right. Item 10E is a request for direction on the City of Merced and University of California Merced's request for $600,000 for the Campus Connections Bellevue Road project. Stacy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for half of you, this item is it's not a surprise, and the other half may wonder why it's here. I'll try to give a brief history. UC Merced, through the City of Merced, is requesting $600,000 originally from the Measure V East regional projects funding account. The initial request came during the 2023 call for projects, but at that time, because there was the annexation process was still kind of in a maybe too early of a time frame. There was just it was just an interesting time. The decision was at that time to wait to see if the grant was funded, and then reconsider their request. It's for a grant for the Safe Streets for All for the Bellevue Corridor Campus Connection Project, which would essentially look at piloting solutions for bicycle and pedestrian traffic along Bellevue Corridor between campus and I think G and maybe even M. So through that process, the technical working group for the measure considered the request. It was presented as an FYI during the implementation plan process because the recommendation was to wait. In February, the UC was awarded the federal grant. The technical team that has representation from all of your jurisdictions, staff, and MCAG met and reviewed the request and made the recommendation to the East Side Committee. The East Side Regional Projects Committee met last month and asked me to bring an item to the full board that analyzed or discussed the full range of potential funding sources that would come through MCAG that could potentially be applicable for a request such as this. So I won't review in detail all the types, but I'll be happy to answer any questions. But I'll kind of run through, and I know we have some pictures up, and we can talk more specifically about the project if anyone has questions. But from the funding perspective, local transportation funds, as we just saw from the TDA item earlier, are definitely the most flexible funds. This is, we have to though go through an apportionment process, which you just saw that the board just adopted for the coming fiscal year. That identifies, as was mentioned, money that will be allocated to the jurisdictions by formula in the coming fiscal year. Those funds would go though directly to the City of Merced. That is not a decision this body would make, but I'm identifying it as a MCAG funding source that is eligible for this type of project to match as a federal grant. The other LTF component is this board did set aside what we're calling generically a bike and pedestrian set aside as, like, let's say a master account with the LTF. So the TDA law allows you to set aside or put 2% of the annual allocation specifically for bike and pedestrian. That account right now holds $233,000. If you take into account the coming year apportionment that Nav just talked about, it would have $440,000 by the end of fiscal year 24-25. I'll just mention that this account is somewhat in its infancy. We are going to be talking a bit about developing a TDA manual, which is basically going to be a guidebook on how our processes are going to be to access some of these funds. So these funds have not yet been made available to a call for projects, but they are funds that MCAG has in an account that would be eligible for projects like this, that would be at this point under the jurisdiction of the governing board to allocate. I just want to put the asterisk that the intention was that it would be made available through a call for projects, not necessarily earmarked, but it is eligible and it is under the purview of this board. The other funding source that comes through MCAG that's at the discretion of this board is the local partnership program. We get annual formula funds, being a self-help county. So these funds are really meant to incentivize or to reward or, leverage your sales tax dollars. It's a bit of a good job. You're taxing yourself. We'll give you a little more to go with it. It would be an eligible pot of funds for a program like this. However, this board has a Pioneer policy in place that directs discretionary funding from several of our funding programs to the Pioneer project, and that policy does identify this pot of funds for Pioneer, and Pioneer has been the recipient of some of the previous LPP allocations. We have moved some of those LPP funds into other projects if in the event Pioneer wasn't ready to use them. So there is some precedent in having used them elsewhere, but it's been kind of a first right of refusal to Pioneer. And then I think in the most recent round, we were able to partner with the county to get some of that done, and as well as the city of Merced. So there is, between the current fiscal year and the coming allocation that haven't been programmed by this board, there's about a little over $1 million there that, unless this board were to direct me otherwise, we would be bringing an item to essentially program it through the Pioneer policy if the project was in need of the funds. So that money is available and at the discretion of this board. And then for Measure V, of course, the city of Merced gets their local measure funds, which is at the city's discretion to determine how those funds are programmed to projects. So there is money there with their 20% ATP requirement. Of course, though, we don't have any jurisdiction of how they use those or what they have plans for. And then, as I mentioned, there's already a history on the East Side regional project funding account. One note I'll say, if I summarize kind of how that discussion went with the East Side, and of course there's East Side committee members here that can speak to it. I think that one of the loudest maybe, or the most shared concern was that this grant is going to pilot solutions. It's not permanent infrastructure. It's going to be, an assessment of the situation, what kinds of, short-term solutions. It's basically trying to identify what the long-term solution will be. So it is temporary in nature, and there were some concerns that using measure money on a temporary solution as opposed to permanent infrastructure may not be the best use of the funds. And so it was through that conversation that it was requested that we bring back kind of a full analysis of what the options are. And just to summarize for this body, in terms of the authority you would have to allocate money to this project, it would be through the LTF set-aside account, which wouldn't have enough, but it is some amount of money, or the LPP funding that would otherwise be made available through the Pioneer policy to Pioneer. I think I covered it all. And I'm happy to talk about the project in more detail if folks have questions or if any of the committee members want to bring up any concerns.
Are there any questions from the board? Any comments? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Who applied for the grant? Could you refresh my memory on that?
The UC Merced applied for the grant and were awarded.
Is there any other questions or comments? So I see here on the that we just the item that we just approved, approving the TDA apportionment, and the city of Merced is getting $756,873, and they're asking for $600,000. Couldn't this money be used for exactly what they're asking for?
Eligibility for that type, yes. The funding could be used on the project. It would be a decision of the Merced City Council. And also, just one caveat is the funding that we were talking about with LTF is for the coming fiscal year, so it will come in quarterly installments over the course of the next 4 quarters. So it would essentially that 756 or whatever the actual ends up being would really be realized about this time next year, because it'll slowly come in on a quarterly basis. Which I don't know if that's a problem.
I think. Go ahead.
I was going to say, LAFCO today, in our LAFCO meeting, that this area will actually be in the city limits after our next LAFCO meeting. So this will be in the city limits. The petition, yeah.
We haven't voted on yet.
Yeah, we haven't voted on it yet, but it checks all the boxes.
Is there anybody from UC Merced here today? Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else?
Do you want me to clarify the action?
Yes.
So this is listed as an action in the event the board wanted to take action on any of the funding sources that's under your authority. If there is no action to be taken, then we have agendized an East Side Regional Projects Committee meeting to occur immediately after this one to either act or to somehow come to a conclusion on how we may want to move forward. So I don't need action. I just need action if there's something that I need to do about it.
Go ahead.
Well, at the East Side meeting we had last month, I was pretty vocal about my concerns with this project not meeting the requirements for being a regional project. I agree with the chairman's idea that potentially the city of Merced could use some of their unobligated LTF for this project, since it is going to be really a city project coming up. And as Supervisor McDaniel pointed out at their last meeting, that this project could potentially save a lot of money, because right now it's to go up G Street to Bellevue Road. Is page 187 in the packet?
Can we pull the map up?
Yeah. Do you have will you be able to grab 187 on the agenda packet? I have to open it. Yeah. Thank you, Marissa. So all of this is getting
there.
I think it's just. It's just supposed to be Bellevue, right? I think it's just Bellevue. At least that's what the UC application said.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so while Marissa's working on that, so as
187.
Yeah, that one right there. There you go. Thank you. So if you see that, you see Merced College down there in the lower left, or now anyway. Goes up, this project goes up G Street and then eastbound on
right
Bellevue
there.
Road. Okay, that's the proposal. But yet, if you just turned that, the 90-degree thing there, flipped it, you could go down Yosemite, which is partly in the city currently, and you could go to Lake Road, and there's already an existing bike path there. So it doesn't seem like that would make much sense to me. And this is a demonstration project that's only going to be temporary until Bellevue Road is widened. And it seems to me that there is plenty of projects. This is to be a pilot project to see which is the best surface and this, that, and whatever. Haven't we built plenty of bike paths and walking paths in the state of California over the last umpteen years that we should already have that information readily available? Why would we spend $3 million? I know it's important to get federal money back into our county, which I'm all for that, but I don't see the taxpayers being too thrilled about spending $3 million, build this project, and a couple of years later rip it out when they widen Bellevue Road. So that's my comments.
Just in response to the regional nature of this is the third phase.
Yeah, 187.
This is the Atwater-Merced Expressway route, so all the other proposed parts of AME, this is the last segment of it. So I think if you're going to classify the Atwater-Merced Expressway as a regional route, then this is the end line of it. So it's certainly a part of that. I think certainly shared the point Mike made about our reluctance to. We have a federal grant that and $3.2 million in federal money potentially coming to us. I think we should be very reluctant to turn that down. And then again, I see that there's there's certainly a big issue is going to be the pilot nature of it and the temporary nature of it. But in reality, how long is it going to take before we widen Bellevue? It's probably it's hard to give a timeline on it, but it's at least 7 to 10 years out, I would think. So there's certainly, you got close to 9,000 students there at UC Merced. Half of them live on campus. Given the big bike route down Lake, but then there's a need as well. About half the students live off campus, and a lot of them are live in that area down Bellevue on the north side of town as well. So. It's just a big potential for it's a big safety concern given the presence of the university there, given the reality that a lot of students ride bikes or walk, and so there's certainly a need, I would think. Those are my comments. Go ahead.
I agree with everything that Director Serrato said, but it just comes back to me is we built UC Merced out there. UC Merced applied for this project, and yet UC Merced's not here, at least trying to advocate for us to put more local resources into a public-funded university. And that, to me, is probably one of my biggest frustrations is, typically in these things, we like to collaborate together. We would be, and I'm not on East Side's projects committee no more, so if that was discussed with the projects committee before that, then I'm sorry. I wasn't a part of that discussion, but, we collaborate on these things together so that we can, we apply jointly, or we at least would know what we're doing. In this situation, at least for me, it seems like we kind of put the cart before the horse. UC Merced went out and applied for this grant. I didn't know about it. I've heard a few things when it went to Eastside Projects, but I'm not familiar with it as much as maybe some of the Eastside Projects folks are. But they went out and applied for this grant, and then after the fact, when it came that they need some matching money, now they want to come back to the local jurisdictions and say, hey, by the way, and don't get me wrong, it benefits our residents, but it benefits the UC students as much, if not more, than it benefits our residents, and those are some of them live here permanently, some of them are temporary residents, but again, I'm going to go back to, I see nobody here from UC Merced to be advocating for this project, and I have a frustration with UC Merced over that. They bring a lot of great things to our community, but it's the small things that they leave on the back of our local taxpayers in an already not so wealthy rural county. So I can just tell you this, whatever the action is here, if it's going to go back to the East Side Projects Committee, I could at least say for myself that I won't be supporting this project. I
appreciate those comments, Director Silvera, and I feel compelled to to share a little bit, maybe that I didn't include in the beginning. So the UC, just to clarify a few of those points, the UC was in communication with MCAG, city staff, and county staff. For the better part, I mean, I want to say even as soon as during the call for projects for measure, I'm not sure exactly when the application was submitted, but so we were aware, and they had expressed the interest in the matching funds request. The trouble, I think, that maybe was experienced was that because of the annexation process, it was who is the one making the request? Is it the city? Is it the county? So there was some discussions for some months leading prior, and there was just maybe a lot of uncertainty as to kind of who was going to carry the ball because of the annexation question. And I just didn't want to walk away. I mean, they did tell us some months in advance that they were interested in this. That's how the process played out. And they have been involved in our measure, the East Side meetings, and whatnot. And I can't speak for him for today, but so I don't want to discount any of that, but I did just feel like I should share that, just in fairness to them, that they've been in communication with me.
And thank you for that, and that's fine. But if it got kicked from the East Side Projects Committee to the full board, in my opinion, probably should have been here.
Thank you. Director Moran.
So just real quick, if this was to go back to the East Side Committee, when would that be?
Today.
It'd be today. We have an agendized meeting for technically 4 o'clock, so it'll be when this meeting ends, just in the event that this body, it needed to meet.
So I don't think it would hurt if it went back to the committee. I mean, if nothing happens here, if nothing happens there, I don't think it would hurt to go back and just have that additional conversation to see if there's additional input that hasn't been shared. At the end of the day, I think this is something that will benefit. Sometimes we have to look at things from a different lens and not so much about is this for this little city or is this for this little region, but look at it countywide. Is it going to benefit? Because otherwise, if we can break it down as like how many students is it going to benefit for the city of Livingston, for the city of Gaston, from Los Baños and stuff like that, then we're never going to really get anywhere, And for the most part, I think something like this might benefit more of the residents or the students that live locally in Merced City, because probably students coming to UC Merced, they're not going to ride their bikes all the way from Livingston or from Gaston or from Los Baños, right? But I think it's a good opportunity to look at it as a countywide project. If it's going to benefit somewhere in Merced County, So, but I don't think it would hurt to send it back to the committee.
Okay, everyone. Good. I said, and to the city's obviously going to. There's a plan to annex Bellevue, but then still there'll be the adjacent unincorporated county areas surrounding it with ranches and rural residential. I just wanted, Supervisor Pereira, that's your district. What benefit, if any, would that have to your residents who live along that street, who commute or work or drive?
Yeah, I think, I find the regional nexus. For me, that's pretty easy. Both county and city people use that, and so I think it would be a benefit. I think it's it's one of those projects, right, where if you go out and you drive Bellevue, there's in the encroachment or in the right of way for Bellevue, there's just not I think enough room to put a bike path through there. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. I didn't see a diagram. I don't know if it's just adding 2 foot to the apron of the road so that they can ride in the lane. Do you know, Matt? What the actual design is?
Yeah, I think there's an initial. I'll get the exact language they use in their application, but the initial one is essentially some immediate on-road traffic calming countermeasures, which will be quickly and easily deployed. That was the first description of the first one. And then that would lead to the second phase, which would be some sort of bike pedestrian safer travel. But they don't specify. And again, that's an issue too. And to Director Nelson's point, like, we're talking about a separated bike path. It's not, we build these a lot, and shouldn't be that complicated. And there's, on a road like that, there's a big need. In a road like that, you don't want bicyclists and pedestrians mixing with traffic when the speed limit there is 50 plus miles an hour. But to what extent can they build a separated kind of a class 1 bike path? Just like on Lake. On Lake, there's fine. There's no issue. But if you need, at some point, you're going to certainly need something similar on Bellevue. No question.
So with that, I think there is a need for the project. I think that there's regional to it. However, this is a UC Merced project, and why are they not responsible for the $600,000 in matching, right? That's the way I see it. It's an impact that the UC has kind of created, and so we get all the time from like schools that are doing improvements to not want to mitigate their impacts to the road, saying we don't have money. I don't know. I'm trying to get myself there, and I'm struggling. Are there savings in other East Side Merced City projects that the money could be peeled off from?
The current ones are the Highway 59 widening, and then but Mission has received very little funding yet, but the widening and expansion of Mission, mostly county, but some city, and certainly the city's a strong proponent of that project. But those are the two big ones. The majority of the regional projects, regionally don't fall in the city.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the 59 widening, that's the next big ticket one.
Yeah, I'm just having trouble getting to the spot where $600,000 of East Side money should be spent there. I think it's a good not a good project. I think it's a necessary project. I don't think it's a good project because I just don't see, it's going to make it a little safer, but not a lot safer. But man, I sure hate to I'm surprised people have been hit there already. Just nobody has died that I'm aware of. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe maybe you guys are right. Maybe the money that just got allocated to the city of Merced could pay for this. And I don't know if it's possible, but is there could some measure of money be used for it, not the whole $600,000? Could $50,000 or $100,000 or something be used? And I don't know if that'd be more palatable to the group. I think it needs to be done. Now who pays the $600,000? I think it's UC Merced's responsibility. From there, can we do something to help it? Maybe.
Stacy?
That was something I was thinking through. So the request is of $600,000. This body and the East Side could, depending on the funding source, choose to provide any amount. It doesn't have to be the full $6. That's what they're requesting. Whether it's a partnership of MCAG and the city that make up the match, it can be creative there. For this action, for this item, it would really come down to that $230,000 that we have in the bank, about $440 by the end of the year, for the bike pedestrian set aside an LTF account. That would be that this board could recommend some part of that, some or all, as well as the $1 million in the LPP. But again, that is, that would be an exception to the policy, or a combination of the two. Although, adding a whole bunch of different pots of funding starts to become administratively cumbersome and costly for the folks having to manage it.
Which pot if I may interrupt?
Yep.
Mr. Chair, can I interrupt? All right. Hey, I'm interrupting.
I'm going to interrupt Stacy.
The $233,000 was in?
That is, the board established the LTF bike and ped. So 2% every year comes off the top, goes into an account. and it has 233,000 in it today. With the numbers that NAV reviewed for the coming year, by this time next year it'll have 440,000. So there just aren't any policies yet that we've brought to the board on how to distribute those funds, but they're there. And so absent any policy or process of looking at those could be eligible if the board wanted to dedicate any of those to be a match to the match or a partial match.
Director Yanes.
Yeah, I kind of compare this to, you know, the project on the west side with the Merced College over there, right, off of 152. There's just a lot of questions. You know, are we, you know, like Director Nelson said, we're spending money to spend money, or are we actually solving a problem? So I think there's just a lot of questions that come along with this. You know, and kind of the theory, right, if you build it, they will come. Well, now we're going to put a lot more kids on bikes going out there off of Bellevue Road, and you know, in the design phase, what does that actually look like? What are we solving? So I think I don't know, in my opinion, I think there's just a lot of questions that need to be answered to move on to something like that.
Just real quick, go ahead.
No, Director Nelson, and then you.
Okay, I just want to make it crystal clear that I am not against the project per se. Anything safety project, it's a good thing. I am against using Measure V regional, Eastside regional money to do any funding for this project. That's my heartburn. And also, since it was brought up about UC Merced having some skin in the game, you know, since I was on the board of supervisors way back when, my opinion, UC always wants things, but they never want to open their checkbook for anything. That's been my observation of things, so I just throw that out there. And they're not here. There you go.
Good.
Director McDaniel.
No, I'm in agreement with the bike and ped LTF money. I think we should do that. And if I want to make it a motion, I'll make it a motion. And let the UC worry about the balance of the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think Matt wanted to say something.
No, I think Darren's got a smart idea there, but I think maybe we could benefit too from having this go back to Mayor Moran's suggestion and discussing a little bit in the regional committee as well. But I think that's probably a good source, and you know, avoids a lot of the heartburn that Director Nelson was talking about. And Paul, to your point, I think there's it's a UC campus, and there's a lot of students on bikes. There's a lot of people using alternate, you know, either walking or biking. So certainly there's a need there, but it's just, is the need, you know, acute enough to have to bring something temporary, stopgap in the short term that you know, for the next 5 to 10 years before Bellevue's widened, that it's going to do it. There's a lot of bike traffic on Lake, but there's and the lakes out there as well, and the UC and the university, or the university, and there's a lot of big apartment complexes right around Lake and Yosemite as well where students live. But you know, I would think they would use Bellevue as well, probably not as much as Lake, but it would still be pretty significant. So,
and when you look at the map, it's the same distance, because they were keyed on Merced College, because you can go down Yosemite to Lake Road and access the bike path there just as easily as you can from G Street to Bellevue to create a whole new bike path. And I do have a little bit of a heartburn because in their application for this funding, they failed to mention that we actually had a bike lane there, and they didn't even mention it. They actually said there is no bike access whatsoever to UC Merced, and that's what created the need for this bike path on Bellevue.
what else do we? Oh, sorry. In terms of bike ped projects, with that money, do we have anything else lined up? And is there anything, you know, coming that's superior? Or?
We have been accumulating those funds because it's only 2%. And as we launch into the development of the TDA handbook this year, we would be bringing the policies to the board to consider how we would be using those funds in the future. So this would essentially be using the 3-4 years of the 2% that's been accumulating every year. So that's a long way of saying there are no projects for this because we haven't developed the program yet, but the funding is there and eligible.
So I do have the motion on the floor, and I was going to establish $300,000 out of that money to go towards that project. And personally, I don't think we need to go back to the east side meeting.
Director Pereira, were you going to say something?
Well, I was,
Okay.
but there's a motion, so.
Okay, there's a motion to use that $300,000, okay? I just wanted to say some comments real quick, and I agree that, with you, Matt, that it is essentially a regional project because it is AME, so I get that part of it. My problem is, you know, the UC applied, they're not a member agency, right? And they're asking for us to use this money based off the city, and then they're putting it on us, and their match is $250,000 of in-kind services, which means they're essentially paying people to do their job, something they're already doing. So it's really nothing. I think that if, and again, I agree also with Director Silvera in a sense that if this was really something that was important to UC, you'd think that they would have representation here to voice their comments and stuff. I do believe it's a safety issue. I really do. But where I have a real issue with it is not necessarily the regional aspect, the $600,000. I can't do that, because it's temporary, and you say 5 to 7 years. Well, this has to be spent in a year, so really it's a temporary 4-year bike path is what we're going to spend the money on, right?
Probably a little. I mean, yeah, a little. Your point's not unreasonable, but probably a little. I would think a few more years. But
I'm just saying, you know. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. So
We have one staff comment.
we have a staff comment here.
Now it is.
Okay. I just wanted to make a comment on the technical side regarding the LTF bike and ped money. And we'll talk about this a little bit more upcoming the agenda. There's a discussion about TDA. But I would just kind of say or emphasize it this way, is that we're stewards of the funds, but they're not necessarily MCAG's funds. And we need to have a process established for how agencies could make a claim for the funds. And we really need to do that in a more formal way versus, you know, just allocating it out today. That's all I'm suggesting, is that we're steward of the funds and we need a process for that specific pot of funds, the LTF bike ped funds. I think Elizabeth is reminding me that we need to not let this be a habit. She's looking at me like, eh. So technically, so what we'll hear in a later item is we did our TDA performance audits. LTF is a TDA source of funding. Part of that process is helping us figure out, according to the law of how we administer LTF, which we've been doing it for many, many years, what are the things we need to be doing to be in better compliance with the administration of those funds. Part of that process identified a finding for our process of having written guidelines that guide how these allocations happen. And technically it's a little complicated, but technically there's a claims process where then the jurisdiction submits the claim for the form and then the projects are identified. So where we find ourselves is Elizabeth is very, very great since she's been on of telling us this is how we need to be doing this. What I'm recommending is definitely the more historical way that we have been operating, that we're trying not to operate by just allocating the funds to projects. There should be a process in place. So she is absolutely correct. And that's something we're going to talk about. But is there anything, Elizabeth, that would preclude us? I know this is you're gonna like have to bite your tongue to like actually speak these words. Can we do what I've proposed, even if it's not the most maybe technically compliant?
That is a hard question.
I mean, yeah.
A solution that, on the spot might feel better is if we came back next month with what the process is in writing and then allocate the funds in that way and explain why we're doing it. Just just going through the audits, that would make more sense.
So that's perfect, because what I'm asking for today is direction. And so they're providing us direction, that they're expressing their intent of what they'd like to have done. We will bring back next month the process that we'll clean it up. We'll do what we need to do. Today we'll take it as direction, which is how I think it is on the agenda. So it's really about, let us know what the intention is. We'll follow up next month with what we need to be doing to set the right precedent moving forward. Is that accurate? Okay. we're good then.
Do you need a second?
Yes.
No, we can just take direction. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Director Yanez.
Can we ask that someone from UC Merced be here next month?
Okay.
My motion is to give staff direction, or it's not a motion anymore. It was just a direction that I was given to staff. And we have a consensus to use the LTF bike and ped.
300,000.
300,000, correct.
And the vote will be next month
Correct.
after the development of the guidelines.
And I don't, do we need Nathan to maybe give us an idea? Do you have a better idea of the Bellevue corridor and AME and the timeline? Because we've heard a bunch of different dates up here.
We don't need a vote.
We don't need a vote.
We gave direction.
Well, Elizabeth was on the spot, now I am. So the AME project, as stated right now, will tie in from Green Sands and we'll go all the way over to Santa Fe and then tie back into Bellevue. That's slated to occur probably around 2028. The development, the connection from Bellevue all the way to UC, we don't have a timeline on that. What I will say is that the alignment of this bike path will not coincide with the future alignment of the full build out of AME. So there is that kind of the temporary nature. But as of a timeline right now, I don't have that.
Perfect.
2020.
Yeah.
40.
Okay. Well, if the traffic click ticks, then
Council.
30% to go toward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would request that Director McDaniel amend his motion to give staff direction, to state that the motion be to state the board's intent to use $300,000 of this particular fund pending staff development and board approval of a TDA policy that would allow for this type of expenditure.
I will amend it by council direction.
It's not a motion, it's just direction. So if it's a motion, then we get to vote on it.
That's
It's
what-
not a motion, it's just direction.
So
Sorry.
I amended my motion to a direction.
the reason that I'm suggesting action today on this is so that we have a vote of the board, so that we know whether the majority of this board would approve this at the next meeting before we have staff devote significant amount of time to developing this policy quickly, if that makes sense.
Yes. Okay, so it stands as a motion by her direction.
So I'm just clarification. I have always understood it as if you make a motion, you have a second, you take a vote. That he's not making a motion, he's just giving staff direction. And staff is taking it as that there's a majority of us here that want to follow that direction, and we're not doing it in the form of a motion. Otherwise, I'd like for us, if it's a motion and a second, I think we have to vote on it.
Yeah.
But I'm not an attorney. It's just kind of the way that I've always been around.
That's what she recommended.
Yes, I'm recommending a motion that that it be a motion with a second and that there be a vote. Yes.
To use the fund.
And that's, yes.
Based upon.
Yes. Essentially to use the funds pending the approval of the TDA policy.
So we have a motion by by McDaniel, and is there a second? By Pereira. Okay, let's do just a, yeah, go ahead.
There's a lot of information. So just real quick, so with that motion, when it comes back, will it have that direction or a different direction as an option in the agenda item?
No.
No, this vote would essentially would approve the $300,000 allocation pending only the approval of the TDA policy. Once the policy is approved, the action today would go into effect. There would not be another vote on the allocation of the $300,000.
The next vote would just be to
Approve the policy.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Because I'm just thinking, like, what if there is some additional discussion at the next meeting that might make things differently, based on what we're trying to do right now and trying to, in a way, almost say what we need to do next time without any discussion or any additional information that might change anybody's mind, if that makes sense.
Director Moran, I will say that from any information we would be providing, this is really the extent of it. There wouldn't be any other funding source that this body would bring. Any change that could potentially happen would have to come from either the city or from UC, but this board's options are limited. So I wouldn't see a lot of that. There could be any discussion that could change from the MCAG perspective. It would have to be from our outside partners. So I don't see it being limiting to what we could bring to the equation, but we will go back after this meeting and talk to the city and UC and share with them the direction, and we can update, if I could, I guess what my direction would be is if the board were to provide this action in the affirmative, in the event that anything did change with the UC and the city and MCAG, I would proactively put an item on the agenda before this one so that could be addressed at that time. So there's a mechanism if something were to change that I could bring it back in a different way, but this would give me the direction that staff needs to develop the material to have action in July. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. Okay.
Lloyd.
Yes. So my question goes back to the LTF and the available funds. So right now we have $233,000. When is the need for the money, and can we guarantee that there will be $300,000 in there?
So as I understand it, and Nathan, please tell me if you know anything different, because I asked that question as well. The urgency is that they need to finalize the contract with the feds to get to have like the grant documentation. So I think the urgency is the formal commitment of knowing the funds are going to be there and getting all of the documentation. Most grants require you to spend down the percentage share of your match with your federal grant award, so you kind of chip away at it. So I'm comfortable that if we have 240 in the account, that by the time that last 60,000 is needed, that it will have accumulated over the course of a quarter or two, because this is a multi-year program. So I wouldn't see the need. I don't think that'll be an issue. So we'd be pledging that additional revenue and allocate it to the city. This would be an allocation to the city, not to UC Merced.
Okay. So are we ready to vote? Okay. So because of the complexity of this, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote.
Director Hogue?
Yes.
Director Serrato?
Yes.
Director McDaniel?
Aye.
Director Moran?
Yes.
Director Bonta?
Yes.
Director Nelson?
Yes.
Director Pereira?
Yes, sir.
Director Silvera?
No, for reasons stated.
Director Yanes?
Yes.
Chair Pedroza?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Next is item 11. This is discussion items. 11A is the status report of the Measure V transit funds by YARTS.
Well, first of all, thank you. YARTS thanks this board for letting YARTS borrow $5.5 million. This is just a status update of how the money was drawn down and when it's due back to the transit fund for Measure V. The first funds were drawn down on April 29th for $2.1 million. The day of repayment is July 28th. I would say we had a rough go around with FTA and the state. We finally got our grant application, this community projects grant, approved and allocate to give us the funds last week on Friday. Now we have an issue with them giving Stacy the authority to draw down those funds. So we're waiting on them just to do the back end stuff. But once we get that, we can pay the first note of $2.1 million in the next couple of weeks. And then the next note of 1.6 is due on August 8th, and then the final money we borrowed was on June 7th for 1.7, which we still have 90 days from the day I prepared this. So Yards borrowed the full $5.5 million. We do have all 9 buses. That's one of them. One of the newer buses with the nice little backdrop, the Yosemite in the background. So I just wanted to give you guys a status update on how much money was drawn down and when the repayments are due. So does anybody have any questions?
Any questions? Okay, thank you. 11B, Transportation Development Act, triennial performance audits for fiscal years 2020 through 2021 through 2022-2023.
Thank you. This item is regarding something we've talked about briefly so far in the meeting. So MCAG, we are the state designated regional transportation planning agency tasked with administering the guidelines of the Transportation Development Act. We receive, as you saw earlier, 14 to 15 million in Transportation Development Act funds per year. It's, a very long act with a lot of requirements. And one of those is that every 3 years, MCAG procure a consultant to review MCAG and every transit operator who receives funds via the TDA to ensure that we're complying with the TDA. So it has the word audit in it, but this is not a fiscal audit per se, it's a performance audit. There is a very thick guidebook that the state publishes of all of the things that the performance auditor looks at to evaluate MCAG and our transit operators. So we did procure a consultant for this. They prepared an audit of MCAG, YARTS, and TJPA. And in the staff report, I've listed the findings, the different kind of findings we found. There are some that are compliance findings, the thou shall fix this because it's not matching, kind of what's required of the TDA. And there are some recommended findings. Here are some things that you might do to help you be more compliant with the TDA. In our compliance findings for MCAG as the RTPA, I'm glad that we had the discussion we had earlier because compliance finding 1 is that we need rules and regulations regarding bicycle and pedestrian claims. So we are holding bicycle and pedestrian claims. We have not, or funds, we have not released that, and we need to have a process for how we'll release that. That was one of our findings. We had a finding regarding a performance review of our transit operators. I know NAV is really like, don't review me, but we need to. So that's one of our, that is something we need to formalize moving forward, is the RTPA reviewing the performance of the transit agency because we are, passing through state funds to them and they have to meet certain productivity requirements. We had a finding that our previous performance audit was late. We're already fixing that. We're on time. And also we need a rules and regulations for a special type of transit claim called the Community Transit Service Claim, and it's for special paratransit programs. So essentially in the TDA, there's a lot of funds, and as the RTPA, we publish how an agency might claim them, right? In other counties, there are multiple transit agencies making different kinds of claims, so we just need to be very transparent in how we're doing these things. So the response from staff has been that we would create and adopt a TDA handbook that has the claims, explains how we would do it, and explains to claimants what they need to submit to us. There's lots of things they need to prove to us before they can receive TDA funds. So that was the findings for MCAG. Then for the transit agencies, each YARTS and TJPA just had one technical finding that has to do with how they report the number of employees and drivers and what hours they're working and what mode they're driving, fixed route or demand response, and how they report that to the state. That's a pretty common technical correction and something that they can do differently moving forward. Their functional findings, which are more of recommendations for TJPA, it said to report your fare box revenue a different way, which I think they're going to do. And there was a comment that MCAG is understaffed, but we did talk with the auditors that TJPA is looking for 2 more staff, so that should help there. Yeah. And For YARTS, similar functional findings, understaffed, I mean, they're the same staff, and that YARTS should complete its innovative clean transit rollout plan, which is underway now. So those are the findings. This isn't an action item in that we've been audited and we're presenting the results of the audit to you. They get sent to Caltrans and the State Controller's Office for us to execute our duties as the RTPA. So I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Any questions? Go ahead, Lloyd.
Well, no, I'm good. Thanks.
Anybody else? All right. Any questions from the public? Okay, thank you. Next is One Voice Program Summary, Mary Michael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So, keep it brief. One Voice was a success. Thank you to those of you and your colleagues and your staff that participated this year. Everyone did a really great job representing Merced County, our collective priorities, and really they were a terrific advocate for your jurisdiction's needs. The trip overall was very worthwhile, largely due to a lot of the adjustments that we made to the program based on the feedback from the delegation last year. So we're going to continue to design our platform based on the fewer, larger policy priorities similar to this year, and use the local projects as the illustrations for why they're important. But we never stop. We're always looking to improve. And so for 2025, the delegates who attended this year made some good suggestions at the debrief for next year. I'd say most of those are pretty minor. They'll be pretty easy to implement. The biggest change you'll probably notice for next year, which I think was a really great suggestion, was to have an introductory meeting about the One Voice program for delegates who are brand new to the process, so that when they meet as a delegation, we can just hit the ground running. And we will do this prior to any larger delegation meetings. And finally, I'll just leave you with a plug just to keep the conversations going in your jurisdictions about your policy priorities, whether that's following up on this year's priorities or it's the next step in the project or the issue, likely because we will be coming to you earlier this year for next year's priorities, so that we don't skip a beat and we can keep moving and keep things happening in a positive way in Merced County. So that's all I was going to cover today, unless anyone has any questions. But the full debrief report is in your agenda packet.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Mayor. Any questions from the public? Okay, thank you. All right. Measure V implementation plan from Stacy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we're up. Okay. This is an oral report. Every 6 months, the board has asked that we do a progress report for the implementation plan. So the implementation plan is the programming document that allocates measure regional dollars to regional projects. It's updated every 2 years. You can go to the next slide, please. The last was the 2023 plan was adopted in January of this year. It programmed revenue on the east and west side funding accounts through fiscal year 27-28, and the board had some time ago asked that we provide an update every 6 months on essentially how the funds are being spent, how projects are being, the progress that projects are making and whatnot. So I'll be quick here, and I'm happy to tailor this presentation if you would like to see it in a different way at the end of the year, so that it is providing you with the information that you're interested in. So just while we're on the topic, we will begin the call for projects process for the next implementation plan for 2025 at the end of this calendar year. So we're about a year out of us being back in this process again. All right, next slide, please. You do not need to read this. This is here as the programming schedule for the west side that is included in the implementation plan. So this is a locked Excel document that reflects what this board approved is part of the document. And if you'll go to the next slide, though, this is kind of a summary of the revenue expenditure tracking documents that we use internally. So this is for the west side. It's all of the current regional projects. I have them identified between this slide and the next, so we'll have 3 different types. The first type are projects that have funds available and have executed their funding agreements. Funding agreements are essential to be able to begin reimbursing costs incurred for these projects. Without a funding agreement, there is no reimbursement. So you can see here down the left column are the jurisdictions, followed by the project. The first column A is how much money is available to be spent through the current fiscal year. And then the red is how much has been spent, and then that is reflected in a completion of funding expended as a percentage. And then I went ahead and included in the blue columns, less important, but just to show if there's more money coming, what that would be, and then what the ultimate total allocation is for this project in Measure V regional dollars. So that as you can see, so for example, I'll use Dos Palos first because they're up and I know the status of this project. They have a funding agreement in place for this bridge replacement, and I just got word that I think it's with the irrigation district that the project won't start for I think until the fall of this year or later this year, and so I know that that's a project that is really on track. It's just waiting for the partnership and the progress to be made with the irrigation district, and I think that's scheduled to happen this fall. And then you can see we have more legacy projects like Pioneer that have been on the books for several years, and as the project is being developed, those funds are being drawn down. So you can kind of see how to read that from left to right. The second set of projects, and I categorize them this way just because it's how it makes sense in my mind. So if this doesn't work for you, let me know. The second category are projects that have funds available to them, but the jurisdiction has not yet executed a funding agreement. So when I'm thinking about projects that are making progress, that first cache of projects, those projects are making progress because you've done step 1, you have a funding agreement. The second one, the funding is available to them, or some funding is available to them, but they don't have funding agreements. This can be for a number of reasons, that the jurisdiction just hasn't started the project, but it also could be that there are multiple allocations that are coming into the future and the jurisdiction needs all the money to be available to get started, as I believe is the case with the Blossom East project. The city is needing to accrue funds to deliver that project. Okay, and I do just want to say that this programming total doesn't include any projects that have been completed. This is really just money that's on the table that is in the process of being spent.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Yeah.
Just a quick question on that, Stacy. On those projects with funding but without executed funding agreements, is there like a timeline when you execute the funding agreement? So is that what, like some of these projects that are still waiting for money to come out in future years, that they wouldn't want to execute that agreement because it starts a clock?
Yes.
Is that correct?
You're absolutely correct. I should have said that. That is usually the main reason why funding agreements aren't started. You do not want to execute a funding agreement until you're ready to expend the funds within 6 months. So the funding agreements say that it is the expectation that within 6 months of execution, the funds will be start being spent and start getting invoiced. Okay, and if we go to the next slide, the third pot of projects are projects that only have future funds. So if you ask me today, how much money is programmed and why have we only spent X amount, I would say, well, we need to take out the funding that isn't even available yet. It's programmed, but it's not even available because it's in a future year. That's this set of projects. So I do show here, and this is for Hunt, Palm, and 152 bike path on the county agreements. There's an asterisk that indicates that those agreements were on this agenda. That is an error on my part, that with our our new software, we learned this morning that those did not make onto the consent agenda, as has been the action. So we will be bringing those to the board for execution. They are supposed to be executed as of July 1, so we'll bring those on the 18th and make sure the county has what they need to move forward. That is my error. And then I also included on the bottom half there, the gray is your completed project. So if you wanted to say on the west side, what's the total dollar amount of projects we've completed, it's just shy of $1 million. And then I tried to summarize on the right that basically says through this fiscal year, or through fiscal year 23-24, technically have $22.8 million that is programmed through that fiscal year. Almost 10.5 has been spent either through projects that are in progress or projects that are completed, which you see there on the left, which shows a balance of 12.4, representing that about 54% of the program funds through 23-24 on the west side have been expended.
On the previous slide, it showed like a Henry Miller project that was completed, or Whitworth Rehab completed. That's 5.3 million. Why doesn't that show up in the completed on?
Yes, good point. So these are not closed out. And so I didn't want to represent them as finished projects because we are needing to actually like go through the closeout process, which we've done. So I was trying to differentiate. I didn't feel like it was fair to represent the expended funds as a percentage because it wasn't a percent. There wasn't any work to be done. So putting completed said they were done, but they're not quite yet closed out. And when they are, they'll go into the completed projects. Good questions. Okay, I'll go quickly on the east side. It's going to look the same. So if you go to the next slide, again, this is there, and I'm happy to send these out if you want to see these. I can send it out. But here is the same setup, same three buckets of funding, or buckets of projects. The first being those that have funds and have executed funding agreements. Some of these are very new, particularly, I believe, Atwater. We just did the PSR. No, not the PSR. The BUHAC widening, I think, is the agreement that we just did. I'm sorry, I can't remember off the top of my head, which would make sense since there's no money expended. So that represents there. You can, if you have any questions about any questions about the expenditures, I'm happy to answer them. There are no funding agreement. There are no projects that have funding but don't have the funding agreement. So if you go to the next. And these are the ones with future funds. You notice, though, all three of these have future funds as in like July 1. So these are not too far into the future. And in fact, I'm already drafting these funding agreements. The city, when I was working with your jurisdictions on getting updates on these numbers for this presentation. And I've already heard back from the Livingston staff. They've asked for the funding agreement. So I'm drafting them now because all three of those projects will have funding available as of July 1. And so you see there the completed projects on the east side, $6.5 million, and then the total there with 24.5 programs, about 10 million expended between the completed and the in progress expenditures, with a balance of about 14.5, which represents 41% of all program funds through the 23-24 fiscal year having been expended. Any questions on the east side? Which I now realize that you guys kind of are geographically, well, no, Gustine, you got to sit on this side, and then it'll help with my, you and Director Nelson. Any questions on any of the east side? Or is this a helpful way to summarize it?
It is. I would, please send them out to us so that we have them. Any other questions? Any comments from the public? Okay. Now we're going to go to Transit Joint Powers Authority for Merced County. Item 12 is action items. And item 12A is a request to adopt the fiscal year 24-25 operation and capital budget.
So I know you. Oh, I know you guys are tired of seeing me, so I am going to hand this over to Serenity to talk about the TDABPA budget. But I just want to emphasize that from last month to this month, nothing has changed in regarding the budget on the operation or the capital budget. So, Serenity.
Okay, so yeah, give you guys a little break from NAV here, and we'll just do a quick overview of the budget. So, next slide, Marissa. So this year's coming fiscal budget includes 3 sources of COVID-19 funding. We talked about that a little bit last month. The budget does increase $740,000, approximately 4%, which is mostly made up of the operations and maintenance contract increase, fuel costs, we all know those aren't going down, staffing increase, and maintenance equipment costs. So as it's been pointed out by the TDA, we are understaffed. So 2 new positions, an accounting manager and an additional transit admin, have been added to this year's budget. Our priorities include continued network improvements, ongoing replacement of the fleet, facility and bus stop maintenance, and our continued transition to zero emissions. So, next. As you can see, some of the variances for our operating expenditures, professional services, $250,000. That is, again, the addition of those 2 positions, as well as potential merit increases for staff throughout the year. We are going into year 4 of our operations and maintenance contract. It's a 5-year contract with 2 one-year option years. And so we do see the percentage increase, and it equals out to about $340,000. Again, maintenance fuel increase of $150,000. We do see some savings on the maintenance structure. That's thanks to our staff doing a little bit more of the work around the facility, and a little bit of a bump in utilities. Those aren't going down in our favor either. As well as $8,000 savings in communication. That is with the change in IT providers that Nav spoke about earlier. So, next slide. Thank you. So our federal funding sources, again, haven't changed from last month, but they include the 5307, and we have seen that decrease from the UZA of Turlock changing, so the negative $420,000 there. We also have the 3 COVID relief sources that are in this. Those do need to be extended by 2026, so we have incrementally added those to the budget to use those funds. Our state funding sources, STA, has gone up a little bit for us, $198,000, and then we do have the LTF that has increased as well. Again, according to TDA, we need to work on our fare box there, so we have decreased our fare box revenue, but it is made up for by the UC and Merced College contributions to our fare box revenue as well. Next slide, please. Capital expenditures that carry over from 23-24 into 24-25. We have 16 buses that are in the process of being replaced. 4 zero-emission Gillig buses. We will be seeing delivery of those in September, and then 12 paratransit cutaways that we'll be seeing delivery of in August. We have some bus stop installation and improvements at $196,000. The continued electrification of our infrastructure puts about $1 million into the reserve fund, and then the replacement of our fare boxes is ongoing, and not just a replacement, an upgrade of our fare box infrastructure. So, that next slide. Upcoming new projects for 24-25 is the upgrade of some of our security cameras. Those are the cameras that are on the buses, not at our facility. And those, again, we have some that are outdated, and we'll be updating those. As well as our bus display signs, the head signs. You might see some of those around town that don't always work. We try to keep them updated, but some of them do need to be replaced. They're just outdated software and hardware. So we'll be replacing those at $250,000 this coming year. And then our SB 125 projects, electrification of the facility on Wardrobe, as well as West Side operations and maintenance facility that we're looking at in the Los Banos area, microtransit service expansion and the vehicles for that, as well as, again, continued zero emissions hydrogen fueling station, which includes compliance upgrades to the facility and hydrogen bus replacements. So if there are any questions, comments, I can take those.
Are there any questions? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, is there a motion?
I do have a quick question. The hydrogen fuel buses, who's the manufacturer, or do we have identified a manufacturer?
We haven't identified one yet.
Do you know who they are?
But there's a couple that are out there currently. New Flyer and Gillig are the main ones that are.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second? Any seconds? Is there a second? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes. Item 13 is TJPA discussion items, and we have none. Item 14 is action items for Merced County Regional Waste Management Authority. This is a request to adopt the operating capital and fleet budgets for fiscal year 24-25. Nav.
So I got a message from the chair to take my time on this. So, never mind. All right. Before we go on, I would forgot to tell Serena this, but we are going to be hosting a tour for the electric bus at the facility in Livermore sometime in late September, early October. So if anybody's interested, I'll send out an email. Just let me know. It's probably going to be first week of October. Lunch is provided, so it's a great facility. You can see the bus beam from the frame to the batteries to the engines to the paint shop, like the whole system. So let me know. I'll send out an email and we can coordinate a trip to Livermore. Okay. Regional Waste Authority budget for 24-25. Next slide. All right. Just to recap, nothing has changed from last month. The revenues increased by $3.1 million. That's 14%. One of the increases is our 92% of the revenues is made up by tip fees. $1.9 million is for organic processing, which is a pass-through cost. And then an increase in operation expense by $1.3 million, which is 9%. That's staffing, professional services, fuel, maintenance, repairs, solid waste fees, and organic pass-through make up about 83% of the total expenditure for operating, and the remaining 17% is administrative services like office supplies, utilities, rent, insurance, and etc. This budget is a little different from last year. We are doing a pilot program for illegal dumping, as I mentioned last month. We are going to be bringing an item to the board here in the future to talk about some options. And then we are adding 2 positions. One's a heavy equipment operator at Billy Wright, and then 1 maintenance worker at Highway 59. Next slide, please. So I did change this PowerPoint presentation up from last month. I know Director Silvera has some questions. So the total revenues is $24.8 million. We have an operational cost of $15.6 million, which is an operation, again, a loss of $9.2 million. It's a gain of $9.2 million. So debt service, we have about $2.5 million for bond payment. And then we have fixed assets, which usually requires computers, something for the scale house, or server upgrades, whatever the office copiers. And then reserve fund transfer of the remaining $6.7 million. Of the 6.7, 5.7 will go to CIP fund reserve, and the remaining $1 million will go to our fleet, which will balance out what the gain or loss. So if there's a reduction in our revenues, the impact will affect the reserve fund transfer for the CIPs or the fleet fund. Does anybody have any questions so far about the revenue expenditure?
Director Silvera.
Thank you. Nav, thank you for changing the word cash or profit and loss to gain or loss, because it's, these are enterprise funds. They're not for profit. So I appreciate just the changing of the word there. I think it better represents what we're trying to do here. And then the other piece is when you look at that number of the operating gain of $9.2 million, I do, as you dig into where that money goes, I appreciate that we're putting that money into future needs. So when you look at the Billy Wright expansion, it's a multi-million-dollar project, and I believe this year alone we're going to put it, was it $4.5 million?
Yeah, that'll be next slide.
Okay. All right, I'll let you get to that slide.
So Director Silvera is correct. So of the 5.7 that's getting transferred over, next slide, Marissa, we're putting about $4.2 million towards the Billy Wright future cell expansion, $1 million towards the future cell expansion at Highway 59. So right now, if everything came to fruition, my budget was dead on. By end of next year, we should have $5.6 million for the Billy Wright and $2 million set aside for Highway 59. So if, like I said, if there's a decrease in any of our revenues, it would affect these projects. Next slide, please. And so the remaining couple $100,000 will fund these projects right here, the Highway 59 surveillance camera upgrades. We did have a couple of break-ins at both sites. A month ago, we had a break-in at Billy Wright. I want to say earlier in the year, we had a break-in at Highway 59. Someone went in the back and stole the copper out of our water pump. So fun times. And then as we go forward with, completing sales at Highway 59, we had to, put gas collection systems. So this phase 6 is one of the most recent phases that completed. So we were putting a gas collection system in there so we can, generate and collect it. And, I know James is working on something in the future to bring out what we're going to do with those gases. Next slide, please. And then this is our free fund. I know we talked about we had a discussion about the roll-off trucks and the mower. We did look into it. That's about the cost. We just put a little buffer just in case, the vendor might come back and say, well, you need this or something else. So, but that's relative what the cost of the roll-off are. Maybe $10,000, $20,000 cheaper than $250, but we just put a buffer in there just in case we need another, I don't know, whatever. And then same thing with the mower. So we're about our total fleet purchase is about $1.25 million for next year. So that concludes this presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, are there any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
And this probably is not really directly related to the operating budget, but I've recently had a couple experiences out at Billy Wright landfill. I took a printer out there to dispose of, tried to get it recycled, and they said, just dump it over there.
Yeah, so
and I have a microwave oven that I was told just dump it in the garbage can by a truck driver.
Well, we do have,
and I didn't do either one of those.
So printer could kind of fall into the e-waste side. Microwave, I mean, I can't give you.
Do we recycle electronics?
Appliance we do. That kind of falls under appliance. We do recycle appliance, but I don't know if that I'll let James handle.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I got off topic, but I thought it was a good opportunity to ask the question.
Certainly. James Moore, Director of the Regional Waste Authority. As far as the printers go, electronic waste has changed over the last few years. If you buy a computer screen or a TV, you pay a fee when you buy it. Mm-hmm. There is no such fee on the printers or other, quote, auxiliary equipment. So we do process some of that to our recyclers. Mm-hmm. Typically, they don't really reimburse us any for it, or they may even charge us for the transportation. So there is a time where we'll look at things. We are looking at a program right now to remove the printer cartridges because we have found a source for revenue for those. Mm-hmm. So we're going to try to make sure we take those out and process those. But as far as the plastic components of the printer tray, the paper tray, there's not really any value there. As far as the appliances go, we do accumulate most of that and ship it off as scrap metal. Things like the refrigerators, things that have Freon, we have to process. Mercury or anything like that. Microwave, there's not typically anything we would take out of it. It would just go in the scrap bin.
Yeah, I was told by the truck driver, just dump it in your garbage. So I did call Waste Management and say, hey, you might need to train some people.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The camera systems that you plan on installing, will those notify law enforcement if they're triggered, or who monitors it? What's going to happen there?
We haven't evaluated exactly how that'll work yet. Our goal is that at least it will send a text message to our operators. It'll be a matter of, working with the various law enforcement, whether there is a network that we can tie into for that. But right now, we kind of have a jumble of systems that have been purchased and installed over the years. They don't all talk to each other, so Billy Wright, when we had the break-in out there, I had to physically go out and log into the computer to view the stored footage. What we want to do is get something that's more up to date, where it's on the cloud and we can access it remotely. So we'll go through a full RFP process on all of that when we get to it.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay. Are there any comments from the public? Is there a motion?
Chair Silvera, motion to approve.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Item 15 is RWA discussion items, and we have none. And then 16 is closed session, which is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation. At this time, the board will go into closed session. We ask all staff and guests to exit the chambers, and we will invite you back in when we are prepared to return to open session.
Can I make one quick announcement, Mr. Chair? Only because I know that many of them, our team will be leaving because we have a staff event that we're heading out to. So I wanted to introduce Ellie Fernandez, our new contract specialist out at procurement specialist out at RWA. She's there in the front row. And Michael Solis is our new transit contract specialist for both yards and the bus, and there he is there. So, and I was also, and I wanted to also say, I thought Meg had left. Congratulations to Meg Prince there in the corner. She just completed the CalCog Regional Leadership Academy, a year-long program that's just really an excellent tool through our CalCog membership statewide to help develop regional leaders. And previous graduates of that program also include Mary Michael and Elizabeth. So a really great statewide program. So just congrats for the completion of that. And that's that much shorter of an executive director's report. Yeah. Thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Chair.
Yeah.
Go ahead if you wanted to make a comment. I was just going to ask for like a 5-minute recess before we start closed session.
Yeah.
Sure. Director Serrato.
Nothing for me.
Director McDaniel.
Nothing for me.
Council. I just want to say, since we're not going to meet again before 4th of July, to have a happy and safe 4th of July. I hope all of your cities that have something are successful. But please remember kind of what Paul said, that it's the animals, the people with PTSD, when you're blowing those things up, starting like now, it really affects people. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting at 5:17.